Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit, and welcome to a port report for Bulletstorm Full Clip Edition. If I recall correctly, the name is deliberately wrong. So, don't blame me, don't look at me, I know the difference between an Assault Magazine Banana High Cap Clip Assault Clip. Obviously. I'm British after all. Now, Bulletstorm was a game that I looked at a good few years ago and very much enjoyed, actually. I feel that it was a genuinely overlooked title in many ways, but what it did suffer from is a PC version that was lacking in features, very restricted, and burdened by Games for Windows Live, which actually made the game unplayable for many people when Games for Windows Live subsequently shut down. It was unplayable even before that for certain countries that didn't have access to Games for Windows Live. Yes, it was region restricted, meaning that certain countries couldn't even play it. It was a terrible system, no doubt about it, and I'm glad it's gone. It appears to have been replaced with the de novo DRM. I talked a little bit about that in my Nearport report, and of course you can look up de novo if you wish. The problem is that the information regarding de novo is very much conflicting, and a lot of it has since been debunked, such as its supposed hostility to SSD drives and shredding them with overuse, which turned out to be false. One way or the other, I'm going to let you know that it's there, and of course you can make the decision yourself as to whether or not that bothers you. As I said with the Nearport report, I've revamped these videos to be less focused on performance and more focused on functionality, since I can't accurately assess performance over a wide variety of platforms, and I don't want to mislead you. So, we're going to talk about options, we're going to talk about problems that the original version had, and I had to go back and watch my old video to remind myself of those, and see whether or not this new version has fixed them. And then we'll talk generally in a couple of light terms about the actual remaster itself. More of a different discussion, really. It's not something that's so relevant to the port, but worth bringing up anyway, considering that this is probably going to be the only video I do on the so-called remaster or re-release, whichever you want to call it, of Bulletstorm. Can we stop with this? Yes, I know you have nice lighting effects, still on the Unreal 3 engine. One of the best examples of an Unreal 3 engine game, honestly, in terms of its lighting and all sorts of things like that. Doesn't seem to have improved that aspect of it all that much, but back when it was first released, it was quite an impressive looking game. Anyway, let's jump in and look at some functionality, shall we? So, there are a few things that have been added to this, which are great additions that were not in the original release and caused me a lot of problems. The biggest one, of course, is my good old favorite, the field of view slider. And it's something that a lot of you would be bothered by if you happen to suffer from simulation sickness, which I do. A narrow field of view results in you being able to see less and often causes a feeling of nausea in players. Not a great feeling. If you wanted to mess with it prior to this, you had to dive into the config files and come up with a workaround. Now it is in the game directly, although for some reason you can't slide the bar. It's not a slider if you can't slide it. Look at this. You have to click it. In order to get 100, I had to be very precise with it. I guess it's training you to aim precisely in the game later. Look at that. There's various degrees of 99. I don't know how you mess up a slider like this. It's quite comical, but it goes all the way up to 100. This is a big fix. That's good. Bear in mind that aim assist and aim lock are on by default for no apparent reason. I don't know why. You want to turn those off. Why would you want those on a PC? I can't imagine. Another completely minor nitpick, but regardless, something I've got to mention anyway, because if you're going to reissue a game, if you're going to remaster it, these are minor things you should fix. When you have options that require you to click on them and then move away to figure out what those options do, that's bad menu design. Most of the time you don't need that, except when you click on something like this. What is crouch protection, you might ask? Good question. The only way to find out is click on it and then click off it. Enable assistance to avoid accidental crouching. As to how that works, well, we'll turn it on in-game and try and find out. Cinematic visuals? What's all this about, and why is it in the game options and not in the visual options? Nobody knows. But basically, it makes the game look browner. I can't imagine why you would want that. But if you happen to be someone that likes less interesting visuals, by all means, feel free. Whatever. Okay, sure. Again, why is this here? Alright, let's back out, shall we? These are clickable, by the way. You don't have to use the keys. It just indicates that you do. Controls. Crouch on toggle. Always nice to have this option in any PC first-person shooter. Very good. We like that. Look inversion. Is there anybody that inverts their mouse in first-person shooters? Let me know. I'm interested to know. Sensitivity. You might want to play with this. The original version of the game was very sensitive, to the point where it felt like you had to turn it all the way down to get reasonable controls, and there was a reason for that. That's because mouse smoothing, which is thankfully now in the control options, was on by default. Never an excuse for this. The Unreal 3 engine is more than capable of having that off. That was messy. Thankfully, this option is in the options menu now, so if you trim down your sensitivity just a little bit, the game feels a lot tighter on the aim than it did in the original version, which is a good thing. Key rebinding, all available here. Nothing out of the ordinary, although I would have very much preferred a separate button for slide and run. The way the game works is if you are facing forward, it'll run. If you are facing down towards the ground, it'll slide. It's difficult to separate those two functions, considering it's a part of the game. It's not just a keybind, but it would have been nice to have the option anyway, frankly. I guess the game is designed around looking down before you slide, and maybe it would be imbalanced if that were not the case. I couldn't really say, but nice to separate those nonetheless. It's also worth noting that Mantle is attached to this, but it doesn't tell you that. So you've got a button that is used for 3 different functions. Not really a fan of that. You do have the alternate key bindings here, and all of the extra mouse buttons do work. So if you do want to bind side buttons, that's all available. Would be nice maybe to have a modifier or two, but honestly, this key rebinding is totally fine. It's really just a way to implement features that were already there by default in the Unreal 3 engine. For some reason, though, certain Unreal 3 games, particularly on PC, a few years ago, didn't do that sort of thing. I guess because they were prioritizing console, and of course there was a lot of backlash for that, as there should have been. Video options, right, what have we got? Well, this is where things get weird, because this options menu actually has less options than the old version did. Here is the old version on the screen right now. Here's a picture of it. Compared to the new one, you can see there are a couple of things missing. 1, anti-aliasing. I believe they rolled this in with post-processing. I am going to assume that. I have to assume it, because otherwise we're seriously believing that a game doesn't have AA. Well, I'm looking at the screen right now, and I can clearly see there is AA. It just appears to be bound into something else. I never like it when they package a lot of different effects and settings together and throw it into one. It's lazy. Texture quality is available, just like it was in the original. Post-process, and now you have a new option for FPS Cap. The original was locked to 60. That made the game feel pretty sluggish compared to what it is now. It feels very crisp and very responsive now that you can go all the way up to 240. Would be nice to have a completely unbound one if I wanted to be super picky, but 240 is certainly acceptable. It's alright. Full screen on or off. No borderless window mode. If you want to do borderless window, you are going to have to use an external program like Borderless Gaming to do it. Again, no reason for that. The Unreal 3 engine has no problem with that option. I don't know why it's not there. Vsync's on by default. You'll have to turn that off if you want to change the FPS cap. Just bear that in mind. Outside of that, what else is missing? Shadow quality isn't here anymore. Again, I assume they bundled it on the same thing. That's not helpful. I don't know why they did that. Audio options. Separate sliders for everything. Nice. Something that is missing from here is a direct option to mess with VoIP if you happen to be playing the multiplayer co-op. That's on by default, although I believe that that is also tied into Steam's VoIP system, so you can disable it that way rather than in-game, so it's not too much of a problem. Alright, well, the question is, how does it control, how does it play? Let's dive into the campaign, and I can show you exactly what's going on with that. I can talk a little bit about the visuals. It's not a massive improvement. They have given proper widescreen support for resolutions that are, say, ultra-wide, and also that don't fit the 16:9 aspect ratio. If you watched my video a few years ago, and you probably don't remember, I bloody well didn't either, I had to check. The game didn't support 16:10 properly. It actually produced black bars on the screen when I selected 16:10 aspect ratios. That's not good, is it? Nobody likes that. So, thankfully, that is no longer the case. It does properly support the 16:9, 16:10, ultra-wide, everything like that without too much of a problem, so that's good. And of course, you can crank this all the way up to 4K if you wish, and since it's an Unreal 3 engine game, it's not that demanding. I mean, right now I'm sitting about 240 frames per second while playing. It's going to vary, obviously, but it is performing, at least for me, very, very well, but you shouldn't take that as gospel by any means. One thing to complain about here is the little menu that allows you to buy upgrades for your weapons and access the skill shot database and stats has no mouse control. It didn't in the original either. That would have been a nice little thing for them to add, and something of an oversight for the PC version. Here's the thing about remasters, especially when you don't make huge changes to the game, and then you decide to price the game pretty much at full. Quite a few people don't really like that. They're looking for significant changes and reasons to buy again. So when you have those little errors here and there, those little omissions, they actually matter a heck of a lot more than they maybe would in the original retail version. Because you might think, well, the original version maybe had an excuse for screwing that up. It was an oversight, but fool me once, shame on you, etc. At that point, you would think that they would have realized the problem and fixed it in the remaster. But they didn't. Minor problems, but problems nonetheless. Now, as to how the game plays, it plays a lot better than the original version. And there's a few reasons for that. Like I said, the mouse smoothing is off by default this time, the field of view is wider, and the frame rate is not locked at 60 frames per second, which means you get some very, very smooth gunplay. It feels a heck of a lot better, considering it was very action-oriented in the first place, and there's a whole lot of crazy, fast-moving stuff going on. It's nice to have that additional smooth gameplay going on. So, having that unlocked frame rate is certainly an improvement. No doubt. Outside of that, though, the game does look relatively similar. Texture quality has been improved, of course, if you run it at much higher resolutions, but at the resolutions you're probably running it at 4 years ago, textures are really about the same. It's good to be able to crank that resolution up higher, and the 4K textures do look a lot better, but that's only if you actually run the damn thing in 4K resolution to begin with. So it's not necessarily all that helpful for those of you that are running lower than that. That's really about it in terms of the technical changes to the remaster. The co-op and the multiplayer doesn't require Games for Windows Live anymore, so matchmaking is all done through Steam, which is obviously much, much easier, slicker, and, well, it works because it actually exists, which is always nice. But overall, this is less of a remaster and more of a reissue with a small amount of extra polish. It does have the addition of the so-called Duke Nukem Tour, but I'm not going to talk about that in the port report because it is irrelevant to the PC version, obviously. That's got nothing to do with it. We're talking about performance and features. They could have done a lot better when it comes to adding additional features and options. Taking away options from the original version, that to me is pretty ludicrous. And while I generally don't have much of a problem with remasters, they don't take a lot of effort to produce, there really isn't so much a harm in producing them, I do absolutely have an issue when they take features out that were in the original version. That said, the original version was not a good PC port at all. It had a lot of limitations and problems, and some of those have certainly been fixed, although minor issues like menu navigation, not using the mouse, are really inexcusable little omissions that, while not something that would affect your ability to play the game, are annoying and indicative of a lack of attention to detail from the developers. Then we come to the price tag. This is a really, really hard sell, even for those of us that enjoyed Bulletstorm, because really there isn't a lot extra in this package. For those that haven't played Bulletstorm, you're still essentially buying a 4 or 5 year old game for the price of a brand new game right after March when we got some Game of the Year contenders. That is a very difficult sell, isn't it? At least as far as I'm concerned. This is the sort of thing that would be much easier to recommend were it at a significant discount. And of course, this is PC. We will eventually get a significant discount. It'll go on sale eventually. Once it does, and once the discount is right, as I mentioned back when it first came out, Bulletstorm is a really cool game. It had a lot of innovative features and in many ways was ahead of its time and arguably may have been one of the games that influenced the revival of more action-oriented and less scripted shooters, perhaps such as Doom and Wolfenstein. There's an argument for that. Don't know exactly how true it is, but around that time, we were getting a lot of very brown shooters. A lot of modern military shooters. Even the advertising campaign for Bulletstorm originally did take the piss out of that with a free advertising game called Duty Calls, which highlighted just how boring a lot of these modern shooters actually were. Since then, of course, we've had a wider variety of shooters available, so Bulletstorm is less unique on the market, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad game. It still has some very interesting ideas, and the skill shot system is still enjoyable to this very day. The combination of the gravity boots, along with the leash, and all of the environmental kills that you can do, means that the action is fast, and has a surprising amount of depth to it. A lot more to think about in the combat than merely shooting people. It's not just about killing, it's about killing in the most stylish and enjoyable ways possible. That's really got nothing to do with the port, though. The increased frame rate will certainly help you enjoy that more. There has been minor upgrades when it comes to lighting, texture quality, and of course things like resolution support, but it's without a doubt, in my opinion, a hard sell at its current price tag. It will be a much easier sell later on when it invariably goes on sale. I would have liked to have seen a significant discount for previous owners, and hell, frankly, they just should have discounted the whole damn thing for everybody that bought it, regardless of whether or not they got the original. That would be a good way to get a few extra sales for a game that was overlooked the first time, and frankly shouldn't really be overlooked the second, but is going to be much easier to do so, considering its full premium price tag. So, an okay port, with things missing that really shouldn't be, but an improvement over the first one, which was, frankly, pretty horrendous. Average at best. Should have been done with more care and attention. Bulletstorm, full clip edition, ladies and gentlemen. Currently available on Steam for $50, or your regional equivalent. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, by all means do feel free to click the like button. If not, the dislike button is right over there. And I'll see you next time.